Hey folks, and welcome to the Truck King YouTube channel. Today we have set up a comparison between two competitive three-row crossovers. That of course is the Toyota Highlander, and that is the redesigned 2022 Nissan Pathfinder. And in this video, we're gonna go through all of the specs, all of the interior details, and tell you which one is better. Let's kick it off with the walk around and talk about the powertrains, and these two are very similar. They are both 3.5 liter V6s making almost the same power. Over here in the Toyota Highlander, this is putting out 295 horsepower, 263 pound-feet of torque, and that is sent through an 8-speed automatic. Turn to the Pathfinder and we have just a little bit less. We're talking about 284 horsepower, 259 pound-feet of torque, but that is sent through one extra gear, a 9-speed automatic. And oh yeah, I'll touch on it now. When it comes to towing, the Highlander here can do a maximum of 5,000 pounds, while the Nissan is actually equipped to do 6,000 pounds. If you're looking to buy one of these three-row crossovers, you probably have people to haul. So now we need to look at everything at the rear end of these vehicles. Oh, and talking about people to haul, let me touch on payload. Over here in the Nissan Pathfinder, you're getting 1,148 pounds, whereas the Toyota actually offers a little bit more at 1,225. Those are good numbers to know, just to know how many people and how much stuff you can bring along with you. Now let's take a look at the second row over here in the Nissan and the baby seat situation. So basically, when you're looking at the second row here, you're getting lower latch anchors in both of these captain's chairs, and you're getting top tethers. Now, when it comes to the third row here in the Pathfinder, you're getting 3 top tethers, which I appreciate, and just 1 set of lower latch anchors back there in the third. Now let me climb into the second row and we'll see how I fit. Take the hat off. So this thing does have the panoramic sunroof. I have just enough headroom. I stand at about 6'2". That is important, but yes, it is just enough. Now, when it comes to knee room, the actual number you're talking about here is 35.5 inches of legroom, but what I love is how adjustable these are. Now this seat's actually really far back right now because this Pathfinder has an automatic setting. When you get out, shut it off, this seat comes back. So this is in its furthest rearward position, and with that in consideration, it's not bad back here. I could definitely fit. Now let's see how it compares to the Toyota. So here we are in the Highlander, and we'll start by talking about the baby seat situation. Just like the Pathfinder, lower latch anchors and top tethers here in the second row on these captain's chairs. But then what I don't really get about the Highlander is the third row. Back there, you're getting 1 top tether and no lower latch anchors. I'm just surprised that Toyota doesn't give you more flexibility for your car seats. So when it comes to just how many babies you could fit in these vehicles, the Nissan's straight up better. Now let's see how I fit here though, because the Highlander offers 41 inches of second row legroom. This is almost 6 inches more than the Nissan, and it is noticeable. This seat is as far back as it goes, exactly the same as it was in the Pathfinder, and I have room to spare here for my knees. My head, once again, because of the panoramic sunroof, is basically right up here on the ceiling. One thing I didn't mention in the Nissan, both of these seats do recline quite a bit too, which is cool. If I really didn't want to hit, I could just recline. And then let's also see if I can adjust forward and back here in the Pathfinder. No, see, I don't think it does it. Oh, there it is. I knew it was down there somewhere. So yeah, these seats also have just so much adjustment these days. It's nice for bigger people in a second row to be able to get in, move it all the way back and get the space. And then if you have someone small and you want to accommodate the third row, you can do that too. And I'm scared to say this, but it's about time for me to jam myself into these third rows and see how they are.
All right, so now, obviously, we're going to do Does Steve Fit? But this is third row edition, or also known as How Much Do I Hate My Job Today?
And yes, these third rows are quite tight. Here in the Highlander, 27.7 inches of legroom. Over there in the Pathfinder, just 28 inches. So they're basically the same. You do give up just a hair of room here in the Toyota. And now let's see. So this seat pushes forward like so. Time to climb. Okay, now can I get this one back all the way? All right, so I don't really fit back here. My head is right up on the roof. I'm pushing into it. You know, knee room is obviously an issue. The bigger issue though, and this is very common in third rows, is how tall the floor is. So I feel like my knees are up here in my chest. This is the kind of thing where I could last for 10 minutes going down the road to, you know, grandma's house. But besides that, yeah, this third row, basically not for full-size adults. And let's go see if that's the same case in the Nissan. Alrighty, time to climb in the Pathfinder, and I tried to convince Dad to get into this one, but we both figured once he got in, we'd never get him back out, so I signed up for this one again, I guess, or got signed up for this one. So let's tumble these seats. There's a button here on the side, and they actually tumble and push forward. This is more space than what I had in the Toyota. And let's see, okay. Well, you know what? This is better, straight up. I actually have enough headroom. The Highlander had this kind of big hump at the rear. Here I can actually sit okay. My knees are still a little taller than I'd like them, but they're not bad. This I could actually stomach this for a bit of a longer trip. And now on paper, this is just 0.3 inches more than the Toyota. But yeah, for maybe a teenager or a smaller adult especially, you actually might be okay back here. So in the battle of the third rows, I got to give it to the Pathfinder. Plus, it's easier to get in and out. Well, not that easy. At least not for me. Let's talk cargo capacity. And once again, on paper, these two vehicles are quite similar. So behind the third row here in the Nissan, we have 16.6 cubic feet. Over in the Toyota, it's 16, so basically the same. Now, what you have to realize about this class of vehicle is it is a trade-off between cargo or the third row. I think that most people will ride around with this third row folded down most of the time and then use it in a pinch. Or if you like me, you actually do this. You put the 40 down or the 60 down, you leave up the 40 and you install one child seat in the back and then have this space for cargo. It's nice to have the flexibility. Now, once I put that down behind the second row, we have 45 cubic feet of space, and it is quite a bit. The other thing I want to show you here in the Nissan that's cool, a nice little storage bin down here underneath the floor, which is quite deep and quite big. I do like that. So let's go over to the Toyota now. Again, same situation when it comes to the trade-off between the third row and your cargo space. Like I mentioned, this room, basically the exact same as the Nissan. Let's take a look under the floor. Not as much storage space, although Toyota does make its tools very easily accessible right there. Plus, that's your cargo shade. So you have a couple more things you can get to, but not as much storage space. However, put that down, and this gives you 48.4 cubic feet, which is bigger than the Nissan. So overall storage in the Toyota is going to be bigger. However, I think my takeaway just after doing all this is that these two are quite similar when it comes to cargo capacity. Now it's time to drive, folks, and we're out here in the Pathfinder first. So I think we're going to kick this off by talking about pricing. So what we are comparing today is the Pathfinder Platinum versus the Highlander Platinum. And isn't it nice when the brands make it easy for us and name their trim levels the same? Because these are both top trim versions of these crossovers. And you know what? We keep telling you this. Powertrains, very similar. Interior space, very similar. Pricing, very similar. Here in the Pathfinder, $57,200 Canadian. Over there in the Highlander, it's $500 more at about $57,700. So the price here is, very comparable. And then you know what, Dad? The features are really comparable too. Again, we're in top trim. Both of these have a digital gauge cluster or a nice screen up there in front of you, head-up display, wireless charging for your phone, 20-inch wheels, all the driver assist systems, and the lists go on. But again, content-wise, super similar between these two crossovers. And now I think we should get to the interiors and just kind of our takeaways on it. I'll start in the Pathfinder. I think this looks really nice. I like the brown leather, nice stitching. More than that, I kind of like how this whole dash is nicely sort of incorporated. It just feels very well kind of put together and planned out. The Highlander, to me, ergonomically is fine. It just feels more boring, and maybe that's a Toyota kind of trait, but it feels very much, I don't know, executive.
When you take a look at sort of this two-tone effect that's in here, right? Even on the dashboard and on the seats and the various other materials, and then in between that they use a lot of sort of piano black, brush metal type accents. It's very pleasant. And you know what, I always say this, people are very concerned about how a vehicle looks on the outside, but you spend all your time on the inside. So I want it to look nice inside, and that's where I think this is just that much better than the Toyota.
Let me show you the around view camera systems here, and once again, they're quite similar. Here in the Pathfinder, you put this thing in reverse and you get that overview look, and then you get the rear view. You can also get a nice look down the side of the vehicle, or then just a wide rear view. And then over in the Highlander, you can see them all here. Basically the exact same views. You get the overhead look and the rear view. The one different thing in the Toyota is this. You press the view button and you get this really cool little 3D Highlander, and the camera zooms out and it shows you all of your surroundings. Now this only works when you're parked, Dad, so it's much more like, I'm in my parking space, how did I do? You know, basically it zooms out and shows you where you are in relation to what's around you. It's very interesting. I don't see other brands do anything exactly like that. So yeah, when it comes to cameras, very similar, but the Toyota does have one kind of cool view that the Pathfinder does not. Even in sport.
Why don't you want to do eco first? You want to do them both?
No, I want you to do sport.
Just sporty torty? Okay. All right, here I am, stopping in the middle of a live lane to make you happy.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about how this Pathfinder drives, and the first thing, Dad, let's feel the power. Hit it. Okay. Not too bad. It gets up and goes. One of the big things that you have to know about this 22 Pathfinder is they went away from a CVT and they moved to a 9-speed automatic. So the old Pathfinder had that kind of rubber band effect. That is not here at all. This thing just picked up and went. Now the next thing I want to show you is we like to do snowy takeoffs. We find a snow-covered icy road and Dad puts the throttle to the floor because we like to find out what the all-wheel drive system does when basically it loses traction. And what we found once again is that these two were super similar.
Very similar.
So first up here in the Pathfinder, here is the normal mode takeoff. And now here is the snow mode takeoff, and you can comment more, Dad, but basically you got one rotation out of the front wheels. That's what it looks like, probably a couple more.
Yep.
The vehicle then cuts your power, redistributes, and then you take off. And the only difference I saw in snow mode is the power is rolled on gradually. Is that basically it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I couldn't really get any spin out of it at all. It cut power right away. Not completely, just to the point where once again it gained traction, and these vehicles all have snow tires, so that helped.
Yes.
And as soon as it felt that it had grip, it rolled the power on again. In snow mode, exactly the same experience, just slower.
Yeah.
And with a little less power, regardless of how deep I went into the throttle.
Yeah. So yeah, and you know what, we'll show you the Highlander normal takeoff here, and then the Highlander snow takeoff. And unless you say differently, Dad, I would say that all-wheel drive systems, comparing the two, they're basically the exact same. And that is to say they are quick to react when they lose traction. And in the snow or in the wet weather, I wouldn't be worried in either one of these.
No, and it's important to point out too that they tracked dead straight.
Yes.
So they didn't kick out in either way. And recently we had that Mercedes, and
yes,
that thing got right squirrely.
Well, of course, Mercedes wants it to be more rear-wheel drive because they're going for that sporty drive, and that's certainly not what's going on here. Like most new vehicles today, both of these are fit with a whole suite of driver assist systems. And what is interesting to me is that, of course, every brand has a different take on this, a different take on what the vehicle is allowed to do, how much allowance the vehicle gives you to have your hands off the wheel, etc., etc. So here in the Pathfinder, one of the things I really like is there's kind of two different systems at play with the driver assist. So you actually have a button down on the left of your steering wheel which can turn on steering assist, and as the name suggests, Dad can turn it on. It will now actually steer the vehicle for you, so that wheel will actually turn on its own based on wherever the lines are, and it keeps you in the center of the lane.
If it can read the lines.
Yes, right now we're on broken pavement and it can't quite see the lines.
It doesn't know where it is.
That does happen occasionally, and that just goes to show you that these systems are certainly not perfect and should not be trusted. The driver is still responsible.
Yeah, just drive.
Totally. So anyways, but we got to talk about what it does. So that's the first part. But Dad, if you turn off the steering assist, there's like a second layer of safety. And here in the Nissan, it's actually brake based. So if Dad runs over the middle line, what the vehicle is going to do, it's going to brake the passenger side wheels to rotate it back into the center of the lane. Now, it's not an aggressive brake, it's actually quite a light brake, and if you do aggressively steer over the line, it's not going to save you. But what I really like about it is, me personally, I really don't like the feeling of the vehicle pulling the wheel from my hands. And that's what these systems kind of feel like now. I like to be where I like to be in the lane. Maybe that's not exactly where the vehicle wants to be, so therefore it's fighting me. That really bugs me. I always turn it off. Here in the Pathfinder, I actually love it because I can turn off the wheel and still use that brake-based system, which isn't that intrusive and still does kind of the same job. So anyways, my big takeaway is, yes, I like more choice with this stuff, Dad. I like to be able to say, I want this, but not that, a little bit of this, but not that. And that's what the Pathfinder gives us. What's your take?
Well, anything that you can turn off is okay by me.
Got it.
Because then, I totally agree with that. Listen, everybody's different. You know, there's what you like, and then there's what you don't like. The other thing I will add to that is that oftentimes we talk about these systems as if they're all uniform across the brands, but the reality is that an engineer calibrated each one of these systems. A human being decided how aggressive it should be or how much control it should take. So regardless of the fact that people say, well, they all have them now, each one of them is going to be absolutely different based on the guy that decided how much to put into it.
Sure.
So the best part that they did was that they mostly have off switches. So if you just don't like the way that guy set it up, turn it off.
Sure. Yeah, well, and with that in mind, let's go hop over in the Toyota Highlander and we'll see how they set up their driver assist systems. Now we're here in the Highlander, back on the same stretch of road with nicely painted lines. So Dad, let's talk about the driver assist systems. And sort of like I mentioned in the Pathfinder, it has the brake-based system. There's no brake-based system here in the Highlander. It's just steering-based. As you can see, Dad's hands are off the wheel, and it is keeping us in the center of the lane. In about 5 seconds, it's gonna get upset at him and tell him to put his hands back on the wheel, like right now, because of course you're not supposed to do that. But it does a nice job of keeping you centered, and just like the Nissan, Dad, you can also shut it off. But unlike the Nissan, there's one thing we have found here in the Toyota: it allows you to adjust the sensitivity. So you can set it to full sensitive, where it really keeps you lane centered, or less sensitive, where it just doesn't pull it out of your hands as much. Once again, what I was talking about, I'd never liked that feeling of it kind of really pulling the wheel from you, and if you put it in the less sensitive mode, it would probably feel like that. Me personally, I would probably still turn it off. I don't like feeling anything in my wheel, but still good to know we have those choices. And I don't know, Dad, you are driving. Do you feel any real kind of differences between the two? Or
well, the main thing I'd say to you is I appreciate that Toyota recognizes that we don't all like the same things. So yeah, let me decide how intrusive I want this system to be. Whereas, you know, on the other side with the Nissan, it's one size fits all.
Dad mentioned it a little earlier. For 2020, so 2 years ago, this Highlander was fully redesigned. For 2022, the Pathfinder has been fully redesigned. And the redesigns in this segment are certainly coming quicker these days because, you know what? These big 3-row crossovers, they've kind of replaced the minivan. I feel like a lot of those minivan customers who didn't want to buy minivans, those, you know, never minivan people, this is what they end up going for, which is one of the reasons why this segment really has grown while minivans have kind of fallen off. And as a minivan owner, I will say that I appreciate, the ground clearance we get here. I appreciate the all-wheel drive that you can get here. The biggest trade-off that is your third row. The third row in these are never going to be nearly as comfortable as a minivan, and the only way you're ever going to replicate the minivan is by going to a full-size SUV, a Tahoe or an Armada, something like that. And of course, that's a big step above, because those aren't going to drive the same as a van. This kind of does drive the same as a minivan, and yeah, I really believe that's why these are kind of blowing up. What do you think?
Well, these are now the people movers. And you know what? When I was a kid, it was a station wagon, okay? And that's how we moved a lot of people around and stuff. And then at some point in the 70s, people started just stop buying them. They didn't like them. God knows why. I remember in the 80s when we couldn't use the word station wagon in print. I remember trying to describe the first Pacifica as a station wagon, and I got a call from Chrysler head office just screaming at me, telling me it wasn't a station wagon. So, you know what? It depends on what decade it is, and I think we're well into that we hate minivans decade. So where do those people got to go? Right into here.
Absolutely. And you know what, just speaking about that, I think this actually ties into styling between these two, because the Pathfinder, it has a long history of being a real kind of rugged, proper body-on-frame SUV. It is not that anymore, but it does have that history. And I think just looking at the two, Dad, the Pathfinder still kind of looks a little more rugged and tough SUV, where the Highlander has kind of gone full minivan, where it just looks sort of like a friendly people mover. So in that way, I kind of prefer the Nissan, but of course, at the end of the day, that's going to be up to you. But yes, my point here is that going for something like that allows you to escape the styling, the bubbly styling of the minivan, and get something that at least looks kind of cool.
Well, and you're talking about what I've mentioned a lot of times, fashion over function. However, these are functional, except for that third row. And then why do people buy them? Because they like the look.
Yeah.
And it's the old thing about, look at my 3-row crossover. I could go off-road if I wanted to. I just never will.
All right, Dad, last thing I feel like we haven't done in the Toyota. Why don't you floor it? Let's feel the power out of this V6.
Should I come to a stop like I did in the other one?
Sure, what the
So
heck?
we don't get yelled at?
All right, let's do it. Apples to apples.
Apples to apples, okay.
And we got it in sport mode too. Both of them have sport mode. So let's feel it. Okay, well, seat of the pants, I think the Toyota hits a little harder.
It's more aggressive.
Yeah,
off the line.
It jumps off the line definitely a little bit harder than the Nissan does. Surprising, considering the Nissan has that extra gear. However, the Toyota does have about 10 more horsepower and like 8 pound-feet of torque, so it does have just an edge on power. You saw it right there. The Toyota feels a little quicker. It actually does make a little bit more power on paper. And then maybe what's most interesting is, according to the EPA, when you compare all-wheel drive Highlander to all-wheel drive Pathfinder, the Toyota is more efficient, which is, always great when you can get a little bit more power and more efficiency. So the Highlander here, 20 miles per gallon in the city, 27 on the highway for 23 combined. The Pathfinder, 20 mpg in the city, 25 on the highway for 22 combined. So granted, it's only a 1 mile per gallon difference combined. Very similar, but yes, the Toyota does have an edge. Well, folks, we have arrived at the end of this video. Now, I have to say it once again. These two vehicles, as you see them here today, very similar, and you're probably not going to be disappointed with either one. But if I was to lay down my money, I would go ahead and buy a Nissan Pathfinder. The Pathfinder has more flexibility for your child seats, and the third row is actually kind of usable for an adult, and these things are all about hauling people, right? So for those reasons, I'd go with the Nissan. Now, of course, I want to hear your thoughts, so please go below, leave us a comment. While you're down there, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, hit join to become a member of the channel, and then come right back here to Trucking to see what we're testing next. See ya.